And what's fascinating about this market is the psychology of it. That older demographic, when you look at their psychology, we just did this research comparing the psychology of that boomer against the millennial today. Well, that baby boomer's been exposed to these products for 20 plus years. If she's a considerer, she's still concerned about some of the basic things like, should I put a toxin in my body? Is this frivolous spend? The millennial, completely different ballgame. She's not concerned about it at all. She's thinking about it as, okay, what should I get treated and how soon should I start? So all those barriers that were there, part of it is the residence time in market. As you know, it's like I look at hair color, and I know you had icons like Joan Cronin here and so on, but hair color, it was taboo to color your hair. And then all it takes is 1 or 2 generations, and before you know it's normalized.
Welcome back to the Technology of Beauty, where we have the chance to get to know the movers and shakers of the beauty business. And today is no exception. We have Mr. David Moatazedi, the CEO of Evolus. Welcome, David.
Good morning, Grant.
Are you the chairman of the board also?
I'm not. I'm president and CEO.
President and CEO. I've been waiting to this interview since we started the Technology of Beauty. I finally got David to come up from Newport Beach, where his home office is, and we're going to get to know David and his company, Evolus. So welcome, and thank you very much for making the effort, David.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
We had some things to work through when you were asking me to come up earlier. So
You're right.
Now's the right time.
And maybe we'll touch on that too,
Okay.
if you don't mind. So
Sure.
First of all, though, David, where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and my family moved to Southern California when I was in grade school. And it was probably the biggest turning point for me personally, because Southern California is home, is how I view it. It's just, I love this environment. I know you do too, living here. And so I've had the opportunity, fortunately, throughout my career, whether it's through college, graduate school, or the working career to reside here in Southern California. I've traveled quite a bit throughout my career, both in the US and globally, but managed to stay here, which is great because my family and my immediate family and my sister and her children are here as well. So we as immigrants, my parents came from Iran. I was born there and moved here when I was 9 months old. So it was very important to me to have one cohesive family, given that they sacrificed so much to come to the States and raise us here, that I stay in Southern California. And it's been great now joining Evolus because we have a home headquarters based in Newport Beach, which is a great way to build a company for the long term right in my backyard, so to speak.
No kidding. Where'd you go to college?
So I did my undergraduate at Cal State Long Beach. I was a chemistry major, and I did graduate school at Pepperdine. That's where I earned my MBA.
Interesting. And what was your first job after your MBA?
So interestingly, I was a college intern at Allergan. And I worked in the sales training department. And when I was graduating, I was offered a role in Colorado with them in their medical derm business.
Before
this is
the MBA?
right when I graduated from college, so before the MBA.
Yeah.
And I was considering going there. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was at SC, and she was a year younger. And so I had this fork in the road of, do I want to move to Colorado or do I want to try to find something in Southern California? And I had this opportunity through a common friend to join Novartis. So I joined this large Swiss pharmaceutical company in the medical derm space, and I moved out to Palm Desert. So my first job right out of college was coming out of an internship at Allergan and into a Swiss pharmaceutical company named Novartis. And I had the responsibility as a sales representative for the Palm Springs area.
And when did you start working for David Pyatt?
So I spent about 6 years with Novartis. The final 2 years I was getting my MBA while I was a sales manager right here in the LA area where we are now. And right after I finished that MBA program, I knew that the next move was to get into marketing and to move into the corporate side. And so at the time, the options, again, a fork in the road, they led back to Southern California with Allergan. I had an option to move to the East Coast with Novartis, and I decided to stay. And I will say, this is where we talked about this earlier. Sometimes luck comes into play. When I had this opportunity at Allergan, they said, you're going to work on a product named Botox. This is about 2005. So relatively small product in terms of overall revenue for the company at the time. A lot of potential, but in all fairness, I didn't have a full appreciation for the potential when I joined the company. And started out in global marketing, working on Botox Cosmetic. And career went on from there for close to 14 years that I spent at Allergan, all very great years, all in the aesthetic business. And as you know, I love the space. I view it as I've dedicated my career to dermatology and aesthetics since I've been out of college, and it's a very neat environment. We'll talk about it, I'm sure.
Yep.
There's just so much great activity going on here, whether it's commercially or development-wise.
What was your role with the Juvederm rollout?
So as you recall, Allergan acquired a company named Unmet. This is roughly 2006. And Unmet had this product named Juvederm that was about to clear FDA approval. And it actually has a funny story, because at the time, I was in this global marketing role for Botox. And they had offered this Juvederm product manager role to a few folks, and no one wanted to do it, because they said, why would I leave a big brand like Botox and go work on Juvederm? And I distinctly remember I talked to doctors. I say, there's this great product coming called Juvederm. I'm thinking about taking this job. And they say, Allergan, you're the toxin company. At the time, it was Medicis that had Restylane, as you know.
Right.
And Medicis is the filler company. You should each stay in your own lanes. In the end, that's how it's all going to shake out. So I think everyone viewed it as sort of a risky play, not only to launch a filler, but from a career standpoint, to move in to launch a product in an unknown against at the time viewed as the market leader in Restylane. So I moved over as a product manager to launch Juvederm. I spent close to 5 years there, ultimately leading the marketing group on the Juvederm franchise. That was a really neat point in my career. I loved it. I love the filler space. It's a dynamic space. Obviously, a lot more options now for doctors in that category, but the outcomes are just phenomenal for a consumer. When you think about, you can get a product that adds volume back, and you can reverse it out if you don't like it. That's just the holy grail, right? And that's what the market has, and they're learning how to use this amazing tool in different ways, and it's delivering great outcomes. There's no doubt that the filler market is part of the reason why this aesthetic market as a whole has done so well. It's certainly contributed to it.
Well, we're going to come back to that filler market when I ask you some very probative questions. But first, tell us about Evolus, and how did you transition from Allergan to Evolus? What was that all about?
Yeah. So again, I had a phenomenal career with Allergan. Ultimately, in my final role, I was leading the aesthetic franchise before I left, and that wasn't an easy decision. I still have a lot of very close friends there, and I view that as a company that's right in our backyard. I have a lot of respect for the people that are there and the company that's been built, and it certainly continues to grow at a really nice rate, and under AbbVie appears to continue to do very well with their investment. For me personally, I knew that at one point in my career, I wanted to branch out and start an aesthetic company. I always thought it might be a development stage asset that I could be a part of and bring it to commercialization. But when I had this opportunity and the board had reached out for me to join Evolus, I thought this could actually be the perfect opportunity for a couple reasons. The first is Evolus has a neurotoxin, as you know, and I've always thought if you're going to start a company in aesthetics, you want to start in the biggest market and then build your portfolio around that. And so this had the asset in the biggest market. The second is you need access to capital. And Evolus had just done an IPO when I joined, just roughly 90 days after. I joined 90 days after the IPO. So having access to capital as a public company was interesting to me, because that'd be another dimension that I'd be able to learn through. And then lastly, just to be able to put my own fingerprints on the company and how we've designed the company, where we came in. It's pretty neat to be able to open up a blank slate and say, what do you think if you could build a company would bring value to doctors and to the consumer and help grow this market? And that's what we've been able to shape. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, here in a few moments. But it's been fun.
So let's take a few moments and tell those that are watching this who don't know about the toxin just what the name of it is, and talk a little bit about its qualities and how you are running this company, Evolus. How you are separating yourself from the others around you. And there are four other toxins presently. So this is the fifth toxin.
Fourth in the U.S.
Oh,
yes.
I was thinking of one that isn't
hasn't been approved
Sorry.
Yeah. Could be soon.
Getting ahead of myself.
Yeah. So I'll talk about the product, and then I'll talk a little about our company, because the company is so important.
Right.
As you know, you've watched companies come and go in this space and consolidate. And in the end, they all have their own unique personalities. And personalities are generally driven by the culture of the company and the leadership. And I'm really proud of what we've built, because it's emerged over the last 2 years or 3 years roughly now. And I think we really do have something unique here, and I'll talk about that. Starting with the product. So I had the luxury of joining after all the clinical development program was completed, and a lot of credit goes to the original founders of this company, including now our head of R&D, which is Rui Avelar. Really had the foresight about 6 years ago when an agreement was signed with a Korean company named Daewoo to do a couple things. Number one, to build a brand new manufacturing facility to actually manufacture this product called Jeuveau. And that's a product that received FDA approval in February of 2018. So we're just over 3 years now since we were FDA approved in the US. This product is scientifically a 900 kilodalton molecule. So the only other 900 kilodalton molecule in the US is Botox.
That's the size of the molecule he's talking about.
That's right.
It's the same size as Botox, is what he's trying to say.
That's right. And the other toxins are different molecules. Doesn't necessarily make them better or worse, they're just different. And then clinically, we developed this product, studying it in the glabellar lines. That's our indication today, is in that area. And we use 20 units, which 20 units is familiar to the market because that's what the gold standard uses as well. So I think what we had when we entered with this product was some fluency around the science of this product, as well as the ability to use it. And we also, thanks to the development team, had conducted the largest head-to-head study in Europe, which was our phase 3 study that ultimately led to our approval in Europe. And we'll talk about that. We're going to launch in Europe early next year.
Okay.
And this is the largest head-to-head study comparing our product, Jeuveau, directly against Botox. And so that gave the market a degree of confidence as we entered that not only is this a high-quality product, but it's been tested. And no one's ever done that in terms of clinical trials.
So that's over. That trial has been done?
That trial's
completed.
How
many people were in that trial?
You're jogging my memory because I'm looking at several hundreds of patients.
And it was blinded, prospective?
That's correct. Yeah, it met all the criteria for the European authorities. And that has been published actually in the Aesthetic Surgery Journal. So that
our journal for the Aesthetic Society.
That's right.
So head-to-head, 20 units, Botox, glabella.
That's right.
Okay.
So the product had clearly the data to support it when we entered the U.S. And what's fascinating about when you dig a little bit deeper into this, I mentioned I'm a chemistry geek. So although I love the commercial side, I've done most of my career has been on the commercial side. When I get close to science, I get excited about it.
Yeah.
The manufacturing process for all these toxins, and really every manufacturer deserves a tremendous amount of credit, it's complex. There's over 1,000 steps in the manufacturing process, and they're all different, and they're all unique in the way that they do it. We've coined ours as the high pure manufacturing process because of the focus we put on the purity of that manufacturing line. That being said, they're all very complex manufacturing programs for all the companies. And you know the history here, big companies like Johnson & Johnson attempted to enter the space with the neurotoxin and ultimately just couldn't get the manufacturing process down. So this isn't just about the traditional drug approval, clinical development, showing your product works. It's about a manufacturing plant as well. And that's the complexity here that I think sometimes goes underappreciated. It's probably the most complex area in aesthetic medicine as it relates to getting a drug approved. I'd probably put breast implants in that market, but that's more just a clinical hurdle more than it is a manufacturing hurdle, right? So it's we're really thrilled to be on the market now, and we just celebrated 2 years since our launch. So we're very excited about the early uptake of this product, but we have a lot more room. Now, putting the product aside, let's talk about the company. That's what really excites me. Fortunately, we've had incredible talent that we've been able to bring over. And when you're shaping a company, it's all about collective thinking and thinking about how do we build this company for the future. And when I first joined in the leadership team, we sat down and mapped out what we felt were going to be the keys to our success. It started with building a platform that powers the whole company, which is entirely digital. So we went out and we brought in the unconventional, experienced digital folks from the Bay Area and different areas in tech. And what we did was we sat down and we said, here's the roadmap. This is what a doctor or practice has to do in order to get access to a product. And all the steps you have to go through to purchase product from any manufacturer. And then here are all the steps a consumer has to go through in her journey if she's thinking about getting a neurotoxin before she goes in and gets treated. It is fascinating when you look at that roadmap for how many steps you have to go through. And ultimately, it's a lot of friction. There's a lot of reasons why this consumer in this market is only at about 6% penetration. Why are we not at 10, 15, 20%? That is what everyone's trying to crack. And part of it comes down to eliminating some of those friction points, which result in the fallout. Our digital platform is designed to do that. Now, I view our digital platform as our pipeline too. So we have a product pipeline as it relates to thinking about future products from a development standpoint, but then we also think about a pipeline in terms of our digital R&D, and we're investing heavily into eliminating those friction points, which we believe will accelerate the growth of the market. We have an acute focus of this company. We positioned it early on against the millennial segment. And so that dovetails the digital into our brand positioning. Mm-hmm. As a newcomer to the space, you see companies entering in your practice, and of course they'd love to get a foothold and bring value to you. As we looked at this market, we saw an opportunity to position this brand Jeuveau as a new product for the millennial segment. We launched with provocative things like #NewTalks and things that made it more interesting for that consumer. But all of that was manifested in this concept that this millennial segment wants to be communicated with differently. And the diversity of the models we used, the way that we spoke to them, it was more colloquial, conversational than it was pharma. Mm-hmm. And we started to do a lot more in social media. That was all brewed in-house by both our digital and our creative team. We don't outsource to agencies to think about what our next creative campaign is. It's all fluid as part of the company. And so as we're 2 years in, what's fascinating to watch is we over-index in terms of use towards millennials. Mm-hmm. So we've been tracking it since launch, millennial use of our brand. That is our focus segment because we believe that's where we can add growth to this market. And we're nearly 40% of Jeuveau users are millennials. And just for context in the market, it's closer to 30% of the overall toxin market is millennials today. Now that being said, just in the next 2 years, we expect millennials will represent more than half this category. So this is a fast-growing segment, but it's not just about a campaign, a message to a younger demographic. It's about building the company, the profile of this product, and the messaging and the campaigns all around that segment. And our digital orientation only lends itself to doing that. We can talk a little bit about how we're going to take that into the consumer even further, but it's been really neat to watch a company that entered the space without an identity, mm-hmm. to get to FDA approval, and just now we're starting to roll out some of those things that I believe will create a significant momentum shift towards millennials entering the segment.
So you recently settled an issue with Allergan. Care to comment on that at all?
Sure. Well, look, it's probably bigger than Allergan, as I suspect they would tell you, right? This was, as you know, Grant.
Allergan Aesthetics, AbbVie.
Well, no, bigger than them in the sense that this was, we were caught in the crossfires of a Korean battle. Mm-hmm. Our partner in Korea had been in ongoing litigation with actually Allergan's partner in Korea. And so that dates back many years, even predating me or the new management at AbbVie. I've got to give a lot of credit to that new management team. I think they saw a couple things. Number one, that competition's great in this market, and ultimately we were caught in the crossfires of this Korean battle and just looking for a solution. And I think level heads always prevail. And in this case, we were able to reach a solution that enabled us and Jeuveau to continue to service the market. And we know customers, they want options. And frankly, it's healthy for the category overall. I think as I go into practices where we've had a lot of success, I see that their use of neurotoxins with other companies in many cases has increased significantly, despite the fact that we represent a significant portion of their business. So that 6% penetration, I think, is our collective goal for the industry, to move that number up. 6% of consumers that are interested and that are getting treated, we have to move that number up. That's how we continue to fuel this market. But, I look back, you asked me about Juvederm before. The year Juvederm entered the market, captured over 40% of the market share. You would think
of fillers.
Restylane and fillers. Yeah. Restylane lost that market share. Yet that year, Medicis actually grew in dollars. So how do you lose half your market share almost and still grow? It's because the market is so underpenetrated.
Right.
And so a lot of times in categories, we get so focused on one competitor versus another. The reality of it is the opportunity is our real competition collectively for this toxin market. And fortunately, I think we have sophisticated players at the table. And as it relates to this settlement, I think that was the case here too. It's thinking about the bigger picture and the opportunity to continue to grow this category. And fortunately for us, it was resolved. That was a challenging year, certainly for me personally, but a growing year. I think you learn a lot through the challenges as you do through the good years. And I do want to take a moment, though, to thank the customers. Last year, we reached out to our customers and made them aware of the ongoing litigation and encouraged them to voice their concerns around and the importance of having competition in the market. And hundreds of customers took the time to write letters to express their own views. That was important to me. We didn't want to have a scripted view of what this should look like. We really wanted customers to understand that what the risks were if Jeuveau wasn't on the market, and ultimately if that was something important to them, to voice it. And hundreds of doctors, not just plastic surgeons, but medical spas and dermatologists, took the time to write letters and voice their concerns. And I do think it matters. The customer's voice has always mattered. That is the reason why this industry exists. And it's hard to believe, but there's about 30,000 medical aesthetic accounts, maybe slightly more, around the country. There are more aesthetic accounts than there are Starbucks locations in the US, which is mind-blowing when you think about 10 years ago. You'd be hard-pressed to find one on a street corner, right? You'd have to drive a long distance. That's not the case anymore. No. But in the end, the composition of those customers is no different than it was 10 years ago. These are individual operators that are trying to make a living in a market that's fast-growing, and they're trying to do the right things by the patient, but they also want to partner with these companies. And one of the things that attracted me to Evolus was this idea of being a small company where the customer would not only know me, but they'd know our rep. And as you may know, I interview every rep we hire. It's important to me that every single individual that represents our company, that's in front of the customer, has the ability to make decisions in the best interest of that customer. And to the extent there are issues, I'm very much involved around trying to find ways to resolve those. And I love customer centricity, not just because it's the right thing to do, but I got to be honest, it just feels right. That mom and pop operation that they're running is not too different than what Evolus is today. And it's not too different from Allergan when I first joined, when it was a single product aesthetic company with Botox, before you even get to the names like Juvederm and everything else that followed. And it started by just listening intently and trying to find ways to bring value to the market. And I think companies that have done that, and there are many of them, we're certainly not the only one that's trying to do it, will do well, because this is a healthy market and customers just want to receive a level of service that they need in order to be successful long term.
So you have one product, Jeuveau, the fourth toxin. What do you anticipate the future looking like in terms of your own product acquisition? Are you in the acquisition mode? Do you think you're going to get a filler one day?
Yeah.
Or a plug-in? I know you grew up with David Pyatt, and he said, I never want to buy anything that plugs into a wall. And I'm not sure if you feel that way about the device. So what will we see in the future for Evolus, if you could share it with me?
Sure. Yeah, no, happy to. First off, I love our singularity and focus right now. We've been on the market for 2 years. And in the last 3 quarters, what we've rolled out our consumer loyalty program, which offers meaningful savings to that patient, and that matters to the millennial. In our case, it's simple. It's $40 off every treatment every time, and that's meaningful when you think about a toxin treatment in the U.S. is roughly $300 to $500. So, for her, knowing she can count on $40 for every treatment is important. And we've had amazing uptake. Over 100,000 patients got enrolled in our first 2 quarters of rolling out the loyalty program. So impressive execution by the team. The second thing we launched last year was digital co-branding, which has not been done, at least in the toxin space to my knowledge. And that is taking our digital platform and taking a doctor who's purchasing Jeuveau and putting them on an ad unit with our brand and pushing it on social media. And we've seen incredible uptake and interest around our brand by just doing that. That consumer, that millennial, of course she's using social media. And when she sees both the customer with our brand, it eliminates one step in the consideration process, right? Just think about a consumer who's never been treated. She doesn't know who to go to.
Right.
Which doctor do I start with? Rather than go to a find a doctor list and sort of selectively choose who you see. When you see that ad unit, if you can relate to that customer and you see our offer, you can click and then book an appointment. We actually have tested also booking directly off of our digital app. So just like OpenTable, you can click and book an appointment. Now these are in pilots, but they're very effective. So you take co-branding, which has already been very effective in terms of driving patients in, and you add the book now function. I'll tell you why it's really valuable. Number one is most practices are only open Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Guess what? The millennial's not always on her phone between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. So she can't just call and make an appointment. She sees that ad on a Saturday, she's going to have to wait till Monday to call and make that appointment. But when you have that ability to book directly at that moment in time, you've eliminated another step in the process. All of this can only be achieved because we're fully integrated in our digital platform. This has always been part of the journey we've outlined. There's more to come, which I won't get into today, but it enables us to do so much more as it relates to driving that millennial into the office. And that's really where we want to focus. And then late last year, we introduced billboards. And now we're doing billboards all around the country. And we've got hundreds of billboards that are going to be going up here in the coming weeks. And it's just been incredible, the interest around that. But in the end, it's all about branding. It's all about awareness. Many great products have done that in this space. And that helps grow the category overall. Now, I know that's not what you asked. You asked me about business development. I'm talking to you about singularity and focus. But I do want to point out that the value of a portfolio, in my opinion, comes from execution first. This brand will be our flagship product for the foreseeable future.
Okay.
That anything we do from a development standpoint, bring in another asset, it only matters if this brand is well entrenched. And there's so much opportunity still for this product. We're 2 years in, and I just talked you through a number of things we just rolled out. So I like this year for us to focus and execute, especially coming off of some of the challenges around the litigation we had last year. Now, that being said, we spent a lot of time on the business development side of it and the science especially. This market will look differently. I think today, as you asked, right, you said, would you add a filler next? And perhaps the next one would be breast implants. Looking at the existing markets, what are the largest existing markets in aesthetics, and what assets will you line up to compete with the existing players who many of them have assets in most of them or all of those categories? That's part of it. Sure, it's something we have to look at. But really our imprint on this market will be made by thinking outside of those traditional categories. There's a lot of development happening outside of those core categories, and they'll evolve. And I don't want to get into too much detail there because we're very active on that front, and you can expect us to be in a position now that the litigation's behind us, and our stock is our currency. So fortunately, our stock has returned back to trading at levels it was prior to the litigation. It gives us the ability to be more active now, and we didn't stop. We didn't stop looking at assets, and we didn't stop thinking about ways that we can transform the space long term. But for me personally, I think this is where it starts. This is about building a company around the customer and doing business differently. That digital platform enables us to roll out things around the customer that I believe can accelerate the growth of this aesthetic market around the millennial in a way that wouldn't have been able to be done if we hadn't thought about building it that way. And then from there, as we add assets, that platform just enables us to scale them much faster and more efficiently. For me, it's not about traditional way of doing it exactly like the others have done. I think that's certainly a commendable way to do it, but I think what you'll see with us over time is there'll be some things that'll be done very differently.
Well, we're already seeing it and how you roll it out. You mentioned new tox. Now, am I able to use the term new tox, or is that illegal, or is that not appropriate? I know you can't do it anymore, right?
That's right. So, with the FDA, when you get a drug approved, you can only claim new for the first 12 months from your approval date. So we had to drop the new out of the brand. It was new Juvederm or new tox. That all went away after 12 months.
Okay.
Of course, customers can do what they want to do for the most part. That's up to them. But you wouldn't see any new tox, so to speak, collateral from us going forward after that 12-month period.
I'm asked about new tox. The consumers ask me about new tox. They don't always ask me about Jeuveau. So that's still out there in the workplace for sure. We get asked about occasionally. So in terms of the future, and you've kind of skirted around what you're going to be doing. Tell me what you think the future of the aesthetics business looks like. We talk about this penetration as a single digit, and we talk about growing the pie. And everybody I've had on the program says the same thing. Every CEO in your position says, we have under penetration. Let's grow the whole pie, and we'll all benefit in terms of the companies. When you look into the future, what do you see for the whole aesthetic industry, like 5, 10, 15 years from now?
Sure. Look, markets take leaps over bigger windows of time. So I'm glad you asked about 5 or 10, 15 years from now, right? When I look back, let's say 10 years ago, if you walked into a medical aesthetics facility, it looked like a doctor's office. Maybe it had slightly nicer nuance to it, but it was a doctor's office. The way that they treated the patient versus the consumer, the way that doctors even use these products. They treated them with an indication focus versus overall global beauty. 10 years later, 15 years later, this is about an experience. And the products fall into that experience. And when you walk into these practices now, they're beautiful. They're like spas. And they're the type of environment that consumers want to go to. They offer a broader range of services that are both a function of the technology that's come out in the market, as well as the sophistication of the operation of these practices. 10 years ago, most practices didn't have a marketing head that would sit there and think about how they market to that consumer. Now, all these sophisticated practices do. Most practices, the doctor, if you were a plastic surgeon, would do the surgery and turn around and inject the patient. An hour later, inject another patient. And they do it all. And they'd have a small staff and it'd generally be an N of one in a practice. It's not the case anymore. The successful practices, regardless of the specialty, they have multiple injectors. They invest far more in marketing than they ever invested before. And the look and feel of that practice, down to the scent that they're burning in the candle, matters to them. And that matters to the consumer. And this is very much a beauty space. And we've positioned our company as a performance beauty company because we feel we're aesthetic only. We don't have any therapeutic uses for our toxin. We feel that's an advantage because what's happening is the lines are getting blurred between traditional beauty, what you see on the retail counter when you walk through a department store, and then what you'll get when you go into an office that's doing aesthetics. And the reality of it is it's performance beauty because these are FDA approved products that work. What you get at the retail counter is a concealer that's supposed to mask the underlying issue. What you're doing in these aesthetic offices, you're fixing it. And that's performance beauty. So we're positioned against that idea. That is a significant shift that's occurred over the last decade. Now, in all fairness, we all knock the low penetration of this market, but let's be honest about it, the denominator is growing. So as the denominator grows, even though it's low percentage, the interest level amongst consumers to enter the space has grown significantly. And that's why as the denominator keeps growing, the penetration may stay low, but that's okay. As long as the number of patients actually or consumers going in is growing rapidly, and it is. This market also has proven it's very resilient. It's gone through the recession, and then now through COVID, you've seen a sharp rebound in aesthetic procedures. These women, once they get in, they want to do it. And what's fascinating about this market is the psychology of it. That older demographic, when you look at their psychology, we just did this research comparing the psychology of that boomer against the millennial today. Well, that baby boomer's been exposed to these products for 20 plus years. If she's a considerer, she's still concerned about some of the basic things like, should I put a toxin in my body? Is this frivolous spend? The millennial, completely different ballgame. She's not concerned about it at all. She's thinking about it as, okay, what should I get treated and how soon should I start? So all those barriers that were there, part of it is the residence time in market. As you know, it's like I look at hair color, and I know you had icons like Joan Cronin here and so on, but hair color, it was taboo to color your hair. And then all it takes is 1 or 2 generations, and before you know it's normalized. And people do it at home, people do it in the salon, it's accepted. Aesthetics is working its way down to general acceptance. And it's okay now socially at dinner to talk about what procedures you do. It was not okay 10 years ago. And by the way, it's still not okay in some pockets of the country. Depending on where you are, the most conservative parts of the country don't think it's okay. And there isn't a universal language around natural look. You know, when you say natural look, if I'm in Florida, They're saying, I only want the natural look. And somebody in the Northeast is going to look at that and go, wow, that's not natural. So there's still a common language that has to be formed around this category. So what does that mean 10 to 15 years from now? I think 10 to 15 years from now, you're going to see the sophistication of this market continue to grow. I think it will get tougher for a credential alone, putting up your credentials, let's just say plastic surgeon or dermatologist, to mean that now patients should come to me for aesthetic procedures. You have to be able to offer the whole experience, end to end. The white lab coat alone isn't enough. Second, I see that there's no doubt that the consumer interest is only going to grow. And that denominator will grow, but so will the number of patients that are coming in. And I do believe we're going to crack double digits here over the next 5 years because that millennial segment is certainly far more interested in going into the office than her parents were. And so that's going to drive that growth. And what does that mean? That means there's plenty of room as new competitive entrants come in with differentiated proposition to help grow the market. I think that only helps. But there's also a lot more in terms of unmet needs for the consumer. And it's simple. You just go head to toe, right? Mm-hmm. And think about it. It's all external medicine. It's all about looking as good on the outside as you feel on the inside. So then the question is, well, what areas are there currently not products that effectively meet that unmet need? And there's so many areas. I mean, we could spend hours talking about it, but the reality of it is some of the areas where they're relatively established, there's still room for innovation. You talk about fillers as one. And then there's areas that there just aren't procedures done consistently. The bigger challenge we'll hit, I think, over the next 10 years is not that we won't address some of those unmet needs. There will be a pocketbook effect issue here. In the end, the consumer has so much disposable income, and she's deciding whether she's spending it on her hair, she's spending it on her nails, she's spending it on other services, and aesthetics is part of that spectrum. We're fortunate now to be in that spectrum. I think we're there today. The challenge is the number of alternative options that she may be up against as new innovation comes in and she walks into a practice is going to make it tougher on the pocketbook. So how does that ultimately work itself out over time? I don't know there's a great answer, but you're starting to see some things happening both at the point of sale to think about ways of spreading out that cost for her as she has more options. You're seeing more technology in the ecosystem, not just us as a manufacturer, just generally thinking about ways to not just bring her in, but to make it more affordable for her. And it'll be fascinating to watch that side of the market grow because this market is, when we talk about sophistication, we only talk about the practice and a few categories. There's a handful of categories that power the whole market when you think about aesthetics. It's toxins, it's fillers, right? It's laser hair removal, it's skin broadly, and there's a lot within skin, obviously from everything from topical products to some of the lasers that are used and everything in between. But there's a lot more coming. Beyond that. So how do you manage that and where does that go? I think those are some complex issues that will happen both through manufacturers, it'll happen through new potential verticals that get created around what's going to be a market that's going through a level of sophistication. I think over the next 10 years, it'll be fascinating to watch.
It's a fun market for sure. I want your opinion on something else. You jogged my memory. What role does duration play for toxins? We know we have this fifth toxin more than likely to be approved shortly. I'll make the assumption it will be. It may or may not. But they're claiming a longer duration. What role does duration play in your mind in terms of toxins? I assume yours is about a 3-month duration.
Yes.
The indication.
So let's talk about duration in the category first. Okay. In general, because we have some analogs I think we can look to, right? Let's take fillers, which would be the next closest category. It's an injectable. You've seen duration increase over time, and you've seen how the market's moved around that. So, the majority of the filler market today is in this 6 to 12 month filler products, right? So that's where the majority of filler use is. But there's some longer acting fillers too that have indications out to 2 years. And they've done very well. They command a higher price point and they command a portion of the market that the consumer is willing to spend more to get that treatment that lasts longer. But there's a portion of the market that is fine to come back every so often, right? So as an example, I know my wife's on a weekly nail treatment, right, which is not uncommon. If you said you could get your nails done and the polish will last 2 weeks, I'm not sure. Some people may want it. Some people like the idea of going back in and interacting with these practices. So I would say I think it's certainly important to innovate in the market. And to the extent that there might be a product that offers a differentiated profile, I think that would be welcome to the market. And there's probably a place for that. But there's more factors than just duration, right? So that assumes all things are created equal and you're extending the product. Are there other trade-offs? I think those are things that the market will have to learn over time too. Because in the end, it's about the look that you get as much as it is about any one feature, right? And so those are some of the things. All of these products have their own personality. That's the reality of it.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the FDA studies are designed to look at one parameter, which is on a 2-point scale or on a 5-point scale, a 2-point improvement, right? And that's what the FDA wants to see, and that's fine. But the reality of it is that's not what an average clinician or the consumer is looking for. The consumer is looking for the whole effect. And what does that outcome look like? And that fluency with how to use these products takes time. Even with our product, I talked about some of the similarities. There are some differences that we're learning in terms of how this product performs once these doctors have used a lot of it relative to products that were viewed as more similar through the FDA trials. And some of those things just take time, but I think it's great. It just offers clinicians more options and consumers the same.
I couldn't help but notice that you use the feminine in every example, she and her and so forth. Also, you touched on the millennials. I think that the millennials, it's more about prejuvenation rather than rejuvenation. The boomers are rejuvenating and the millennials are prejuvenating. And I see the same increase all around me, college kids even, and right on through the 30-somethings. The other thing, though, I'm seeing an increased number of men. They're on Zoom calls. They're seeing their necks like they've never seen before. They're seeing their baggy eyelids like they've never seen before. They usually spend 10, 15 minutes a day shaving and brushing their teeth. Now they're spending 3, 4, 6, 10 hours looking at their faces. So I have been absolutely deluged by the number of men coming in for facial plastic surgery, and in general, but especially facial plastic surgery. So I wouldn't overlook the male population if I were you.
Well, look, first of all, you're a pioneer when it comes to men, right? I've visited the
Marina Manland, where men can feel good about looking great.
And you know I'm a Laker fan, so I'd always hear the ads as well on the Lakers. So
yeah, Ireland and Mason.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. So first, you're right. This is also about men. I mean, I use these products as a man, and I do believe that market is meaningful and a market that is even earlier in its development than obviously the female segment. The reason I speak specifically to the woman is we are a single product company that's trying to focus our investment. Right. We see our focus around a millennial female, and that is who we're targeting because at this point, at this stage in our company, we need to be targeted in our investment. And so that's why we have that singularity and focus. That being said, certainly companies with greater resources, and when I was in prior roles at Allergan, I was a big advocate of investing behind men and growing that market. And I think that's the right thing to do for market leaders that have a significant investment, to be investing along with the investment in women into the growth in the male population. For us as a smaller company, unfortunately, fortunately we'll be in a position in the future as we continue to grow this business to be investing there. I'd view that as a luxury when we're there. That really means that we're continuing to build our business. At this point in time, though, it's just for us, you have to be decisive about what you do as a leader, and that's just not an area we're able to invest in.
That's smart. I get it. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. We've all learned a lot, and it's been a pleasure working with you over all the years and the different companies you've been involved in. And you're truly a friend and a friend to industry. And I hope you continue to support the Aesthetic Society. And as you get larger, I hope you become a big-time premier partner of the Aesthetic Society.
Thank you, Grant. It's great to be here.
Yep. Thank you very much for coming. And thank you all very much for joining us on this issue of The Technology of Beauty. We'll see you next week.